Good morning. It's a Saturday morning, and today I'm going to be working on the brake pads on this 2010 Ford Focus. So let's get started. One thing I like to do before I start to jack up a car to work under it is to block the wheels and apply the emergency brake. For an added amount of safety, I'm taking the concrete block and placing it under the supports for the wheel. Just in case the jack should fail, I don't have to worry about the car falling on me. So the first thing we want to do is get this caliper taken apart. This is the entire caliper assembly. What we want to do is take this part off. This is the part that holds the brake pads. These are the pads right here. There's one on each side of the rotor. All right, to get this off, there are two bolts on the back. One is on the bottom, and one is up here on the top. I like penetrating fluid better, but if you have WD-40, that'll work too. Just make sure that you get it in there really good to get rid of any of that rust that's built up. All right, when you start this job, you're going to want to put on some gloves because your hands are going to get really dirty doing this, unless you don't mind taking a half an hour washing all this crud off of your hands. But I use gloves. All right, so these are 14mm bolts. So I'm going to take my socket and I'm going to lay it over this first top bolt. And I like to use a rubber mallet to tap on this thing with, just to loosen it up. Once you get it loose, it comes out pretty easy. And that's it. That's the bolt. So I'm going to take out the bottom one. Okay, with those bolts out, I can now take off this cover that houses the brake pads. It takes a little effort to get this off, because once those brake pads expand, there we go. Okay. All right, so I'm going to try to briefly explain how this thing works. This is the brake line, contains the brake fluid. The brake fluid uses hydraulics to press this piston in and or out. This piston will push against these pads and compress them against the rotor, which slows down the wheel. That's how your brakes work. So what we want to do is take these brake pads out right here, because they're getting worn down pretty good. And I'll do that and show you what they look like. Okay, so this brake pad is worn down quite a bit. It was definitely time to replace these. So the back one comes out the same way. If I can get it out. Keep blocking my sun. There we go. Okay. Yeah, this one's worn pretty bad as well. So yeah, I'm glad I'm doing this. It really needed it. All right, so one thing that we've got to do before we can put these new brake pads in is to compress this cylinder. This space between here is where the rotor and the brake pads all have to fit. Now, when we had the old brake pads in there, they fit in there perfectly with the rotor because they'd been worn down. But when we look at the new brake pads, here's the width on the new brake pads. Compare that to the old one. There's no way that these are going to fit in that space until we move this cylinder out of the way. So that's the first thing that we have to do before we can install these pads. All right, so the way that I do this is I'll take a piece of wood like this 2 by 3/4 inch piece of scrap wood, and I will set it against this cylinder, and I'll take a C-clamp and wrap it across the entire thing side to side, because trying to compress this any other way is impossible unless you have a machine that'll do it, which I don't. You can't put the end of this against the cylinder. You'll end up puncturing this and you'll have no more seal. Your fluid will leak all over the place. You'll break the cylinder. So what I'm going to do is just start turning this, and it takes a little bit of effort to get it to close, but you want to force this cylinder all the way back in to get those brake pads to fit again. And just keep tightening it until it gets all the way down. Okay, that's about as tight as I'm going to get that, so let's take that back off. And that's what you want. You want that thing to be totally compressed again. That way, when you start putting your new brake pads in, it's going to leave room for your rotor in there. So I'm going to get these pads back on and this back on. Okay, so when you're putting these brake pads back in, you'll notice that on the end there's this metal spring, and what that does is it will, when the brake pads compress and you release the brake, it pulls it back. This sits in here. You see where this has the indentations here and here? That matches this part on the brake pad, and so that will just sit right in there like that. And the same thing on the top. So this lines up kind of like that on each end. But one thing that you want to do before you put those on is, while you're at your auto parts store, get this adhesive, or this lubricant, not adhesive, lubricant, and apply it here and here and here and here, so that this will slide freely back and forth. Alright, so this is what it looks like when they're fully installed. And this is what I was telling you about, that spring where it'll push it back out. So that cylinder pushes on here, compressing both of these together against the rotor, and then the springs will force it back out again when you take your foot off the brake. Alright, now I'm going to put this piece back on, and this should fit around here pretty easily since we compressed that cylinder. And we'll just take these nuts up here, they compress as well. So you'll do that on the top and you'll do it on the bottom, and that goes right back on just like that. Alright, so now we're going to put these caliper bolts back in. But one thing that you want to do with these that's very important is you want to put some thread locker on there. If you don't do that, what'll happen is, as you're driving down the road, you're putting a lot of force on this caliper and everything associated with it, and it causes a lot of vibration. So your screw can actually twist itself out and fall out of the caliper. If that happens when you're going down the road, that's going to be really bad. You can have a very bad accident or damage your wheel really badly. But this is probably one of the most important parts of this job. Make sure you put some thread locker on this bolt to keep it locked in place when you put this back together. Okay, so I'm just going to apply some of this on here. I don't have to put a ton of it on, just enough to say so. and this will lock that up when it dries so that it won't come out. If I can get that threaded right, there we go. Okay, I'm going to take the ratchet, tighten that back up, and get the other one in there real quick. Okay, the other bolt, I'll put that one in too. Okay, put that down here in the other bowl. Let's see. There we go. Okay, just going to tighten these up now that they're in place. There we go. And that thread locker should hold those in there. Get them both. Okay. Alrighty. So that part is done. And I will get this wrapped up. And these brake pads are on. That job is done. All right, so it's a pretty simple procedure. And you just repeat the same thing on the other side. When you buy them, they come with 4 pads. Just do both sides. Wheels back on. And now we'll go around and do exactly the same thing on the other sides. You might notice that some of your brake fluid will leak out of your fill as you compress those cylinders. It's okay, that's normal. Just give it a check when you're done to make sure it's up at your max fill level. When you first get in and pump the brake pedal, it'll feel a little spongy. Just keep pumping it and it'll firm right up. And then go back and check your level again. Make sure it's at the max level. And that's it. We're done. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.